Have you ever felt your body slip away before your soul? Did I have? My name is Samantha Reed, and 1 year ago I flatlined at 2:07 a.m. on a quiet Tuesday in October. There was no dramatic crash, no farewell. Just a silent room full of blinking monitors and people in white coats whispering medical terms they assumed I couldn't hear. Skull fracture, intracranial pressure. Non-responsive. I wasn't conscious, not really, but I was there. Floating somewhere between breath and goodbye. And that night I learned the most painful truth of all. The people I called mom and dad had already let me go. I didn't see their faces, I couldn't open my eyes, but I heard everything. My mother's heels clicking too fast on the tile. My father clearing his throat before asking the neurologist, "What kind of costs are we talking about here?" No one asked if I was in pain. No one said my name with worry. Just questions, just hesitation. When the doctor asked if they were my legal guardians, my father said it was informal. My mother added, "We did what we could, but she's not really our responsibility." The silence after that was louder than the heart monitor's beep. They left, just walked out. The nurses said they'd stepped outside to make a call, but they never came back. I was alone in the darkest place I'd ever been until one voice changed everything. "We need someone," a nurse whispered. "Anyone." And someone came. Her name was Jordan. My best friend, my co-founder, my chosen sister. She flew in overnight, signed every form, demanded every treatment, and sat beside my bed like her love could keep my heart beating. And maybe it did. Because by the next morning, I was still alive. Barely, but alive. They say trauma strips you down to your bones, but for me it did something deeper. It erased the lies. When I woke up, tube in my throat, pain in every limb, I didn't just remember the accident. I remembered everything that led to it. The years I spent trying to be good enough. The careful smiles. The trophies on the shelf no one dusted. The way my mother always looked at me like I was something borrowed. That ICU room became a mirror I couldn't avoid. And what it showed me wasn't death. It was truth. So no, this story isn't about dying. It's about what happened after. About the letter that revealed everything. About the people who came back only when there was something to claim. And the quiet house that became my refuge and my weapon. If you've ever wondered what it means to take your life back, not just physically, but emotionally, stay with me. Because what I'm about to share might sound like a tragedy, but it's actually the beginning of something unbreakable. They used to call me the easy one. Samantha doesn't cause trouble. Samantha always finishes her homework. Samantha always says, "Thank you." At every family dinner, my parents would brag about Emily's art shows, her musical recitals, her high school popularity, but when it came to me, it was always about performance. She got a perfect score again. She skipped a grade. It sounded like praise, but it felt like a checklist. I wasn't being celebrated. I was being filed under efficient. That word would follow me like a shadow, like I was a machine that worked just right, but didn't ask for love. I used to think being good would keep me safe. I color-coded my notebooks. I helped Emily study, even when she teased me for trying too hard. I vacuumed the living room before my mom got home, just to see if she'd notice. She didn't. She never did. Once I won first place in the regional science fair. I came home holding the ribbon like it was a proof I was worth something. My dad looked up from his phone and said, "That's what we expect from you, Sam. No smile, no hug, just expectation dressed as approval." What hurt the most wasn't their coldness, it was the warmth they gave to someone else. Emily got the bigger bedroom, the last slice of cake, the seat by the window on every family trip. Her drawings lived on the fridge. Mine were tucked in drawers that smelled of lemon-scented cleaning spray. When she cried, they comforted. When I cried, they asked, "What's wrong with you today?" Slowly, I learned to keep quiet, to smile politely, to disappear in plain sight. After all, being seen meant being compared, and I never won that game. The truth is, I didn't need a spotlight. I just needed space. A place to be messy, loud, imperfect, and still wanted. But in my house, love came with terms and conditions. You were loved if you performed, if you matched the image, if you stayed within the lines. So I became the girl who never colored outside them. And the older I got, the more I confused obedience with belonging. I thought that if I kept being perfect one day, they'd choose me. One day they'd see me. But day after day, year after year, I stayed invisible. Looking back, I wish someone had told me that perfection is not proof of worth, that doing everything right doesn't guarantee you'll be loved the right way. The lesson didn't come from books or teachers. It came from silence, from watching how people treated me when I didn't succeed, when I didn't show up smiling. That's when I learned the difference between being needed and being loved. And when the accident stripped everything away, it left that truth raw and exposed. But it also made space for something new, something real, which brings me to the woman who gave me that space in the first place. By the time I turned 16, I wasn't just good, I was exceptional. Straight A's, state science awards, early admission interviews. On paper, I was every parent's dream. Inside, I was exhausted. Being the good one isn't about being kind or helpful, it's about being afraid. Afraid that if you mess up, no one will stay. So I said yes to everything. I volunteered, I tutored. I got up early to iron my school uniform, even when no one would notice. But they did notice. Just not in the way I hoped. They noticed my results, not the girl behind them. There was a night in junior year I'll never forget. I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting a scholarship essay. My mom passed by my room and paused in the doorway. I thought just maybe she'd say, "You're working so hard. I'm proud of you." Instead, she asked, "Did you remember to take the trash out?" That moment taught me something important. When people get used to your perfection, they stop appreciating your effort. And when you're always reliable, your pain becomes invisible. No one thinks to ask if you're okay. They assume you are because you always seem to be. College became my escape plan. I applied to 12 universities, got into 9, and chose Yale with a full scholarship. When I told my parents, they nodded. That's what we expected, not a single congratulations. At graduation, my mom wore sunglasses the whole ceremony and left before the group photo. I thought maybe she had a migraine. Later, I learned it was because she didn't want to sit through another of Sam's overachievements. I laughed when Jordan told me, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that bubbles up when the truth finally stings too much to hold in. The problem with being the dependable one is that eventually you become a tool. Not a daughter, not a person. Just something convenient, silent, and sharp. I carried everyone's burdens, Emily's drama, my dad's expectations, my mom's dismissiveness, and still managed to keep my GPA perfect. But I was slowly erasing myself in the process. You don't notice it at first. You think you're growing. In truth, you're shrinking to fit a version of yourself that fits their narrative. And by the time I realized it, I was a stranger in my own life. Successful, yes, but utterly detached from who I really was. Still, something inside me stayed alive. A quiet voice that whispered, "You don't have to earn love to deserve it." I didn't believe it yet, but I held on to it. Like a seed waiting for sun. That seed finally found its light in the place I least expected, in a house filled with old books, lavender candles, and a woman whose love didn't ask for perfection. Her name was Margot. And she didn't just save me, she saw me. The first time I stayed at Margot's house, I was 12. My parents said they needed some space and sent me to Albany for the summer. The house was old, creaky, and smelled like lavender and cinnamon. But from the moment Margot opened the door, I felt something I hadn't felt in years wanted. She didn't smile out of politeness. She smiled like she was genuinely happy to see me. That night, she tucked me into a bed with mismatched quilts and said, "You can wake up late tomorrow. No chores, no schedule, just rest." I think I slept deeper than I had in months. Margot wasn't loud or overly affectionate. She didn't fuss, but she saw things. If I frowned at my cereal, she'd say, "Too many raisins." If I was quiet too long, she'd nudge a book across the table and say, "This one helped me when I was feeling small." She had a softness that made silence feel safe, not awkward. We didn't talk about my parents. She never asked why I flinched when someone raised their voice. She just let me be messy, moody, tired, and still made room at the table. In her house, I didn't have to perform to be loved. We'd read together on rainy afternoons, her on the recliner, me curled up on the floor. One day she handed me a worn copy of Jane Eyre and said, "You remind me of her. Quiet, sharp, full of fire, you're still learning to trust." I asked if she meant I was an orphan. She chuckled softly and said, "Not every family is built from blood." It stuck with me, that line. Back then I didn't know how true it was. But even as a kid I felt it. I wasn't just passing time in her home. I was healing there. In the kitchen, she'd let me help knead bread even if I got flour everywhere. She'd hum Billie Holiday while watering her violets, and never once asked me to be anything more than I already was. And when I left that summer, she handed me a tin of cookies and said, "There's always a seat at my table, Sam, no matter how far you go." That sentence became an anchor for me. In every high-pressure meeting, every sleepless night at college, every birthday my family forgot, I'd replay it in my mind. Her love was the only thing that didn't come with conditions. Margot wasn't perfect. She had arthritis and sometimes forgot the names of TV characters. But her presence was steady, generous. She reminded me that love doesn't have to be loud to be strong. That kindness isn't a performance, it's a practice. And most importantly, she gave me something no one else had a place to return to. What I didn't know then was that Margot was carrying a secret too. One she'd kept hidden out of protection, or maybe fear. A secret that would only come to light after she was gone, in a letter sealed with my name. It was raining the night everything changed. That soft, steady kind of rain that turns streets into blurred mirrors and makes you forget where the road ends and the sky begins. I'd stayed late at the office again. We were preparing a new diagnostic rollout, and I didn't want to leave anything unfinished. Jordan texted me twice to go home. I ignored her. Just 15 more minutes, I thought. But fate doesn't wait for you to feel ready. At the corner of Holston and Main, a truck ran the red light. 60 miles per hour. Metal screamed before everything went quiet. I don't remember the impact, just the stillness that followed. The way time folded in on itself. They told me later that my car had to be cut open, that my ribs were broken, my collarbone shattered, and that there was bleeding in my brain. I was unconscious when I arrived at the hospital. Intubated, motionless, just a girl with machines keeping her heart in rhythm. At 2:07 a.m., the hospital called my emergency contacts, Clarence and Ruth Monroe, my legal parents, the people I still believed would show up even if they didn't always love me well. They came. Just past 3:00 a.m. My nurses said they stood at the foot of the bed for exactly 3 minutes. My mother adjusted her scarf. My father stared at the monitors. Then the doctor approached and asked the most critical question. "Are you her legal guardians? We need consent to operate." And that's when it happened. That quiet betrayal I wouldn't remember hearing, but would come to feel in every cell of my recovering body. "It was never finalized," my father said. "She's not really our daughter," my mother added, and then they left. The thing is, trauma doesn't just fracture bones, it fractures belief. I woke up days later, unable to move, speak, or understand time. But I remembered enough. I remembered Jordan's voice reading next to me. The soft touch of someone dabbing my forehead with a washcloth. The sound of Billie Holiday playing quietly on the speaker. But I also remembered the silence, the absence, the people who didn't stay. It wasn't the pain that hurt most, it was the decision. That they chose to walk away from me like I was a stranger in a bed they never meant to fill. That night taught me something most people learn too late. Family isn't about who's listed on your birth certificate. It's about who shows up when your world caves in. And in my darkest hour, Jordan and a nurse named Celeste were the ones holding the flashlight. They didn't share my blood, but they shared their presence, their time, and their belief that I was still worth fighting for. When I finally blinked awake, Celeste whispered, "You made it, sweetheart." And I did. But the fight wasn't over, because when I opened my eyes, I had no idea what they'd taken from me. It was a gray Thursday when the letter arrived. The kind of day where everything feels too quiet, like the world is holding its breath. I was still in recovery, barely able to sit up without nausea. Jordan was helping me eat soup when the door clicked. A man in a charcoal suit stepped in. Mr. Grayson, Margot's lawyer. He carried a folder under one arm and a sealed envelope with my name written in Margot's unmistakable handwriting. "She asked me to deliver this personally," he said gently. should anything happen before she could speak to you herself. My hands trembled as I reached for it. Inside was a letter 3 pages long, folded carefully like she'd smoothed every crease with love. Her handwriting wavered in places, but the words were clear. She told me about Caroline, her niece, a brilliant, troubled 18-year-old who got pregnant too young and too alone. The father vanished. Margot offered a solution: adoption within the family. Clarence and Ruth, who had struggled with infertility, agreed. But fate played its tricks. Ruth became pregnant with Emily just weeks after taking me in. 2 babies, one theirs, one not. And slowly Margot wrote they made sure everyone forgot which one didn't belong. She had watched it all unfold, how I became the quiet one, the afterthought. She confronted Clarence more than once. He always promised to do better. They never did. But I saw you, she wrote. Not what they wanted you to be, but who you really were. Curious, resilient, kind. The last line read, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better. But I made sure they couldn't hurt you again. I cried harder than I had since the accident. For the little girl who kept trying. For the woman who never stopped watching. Grayson slid another folder across the table. Legal papers. Margot had left me everything: her house, her belongings, her journals, even a small trust. But there was more. Clarence and Ruth had filed for emergency conservatorship. They were claiming I was mentally unfit to manage Margot's estate. They assumed you'd be too weak to fight back, Grayson said quietly. I stared at their names on the petition. They had left me in a hospital bed and were now trying to take what Margot had left me, not out of grief, but out of greed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. But what they didn't know was that Margot had given me more than property. She'd given me proof. Her letter, the adoption paperwork, every signed document. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. The pain didn't disappear, but it found purpose. I wasn't just going to protect what was mine. I was going to show them exactly who they'd underestimated. That fight wouldn't begin in a courtroom. It would start somewhere quieter. At the house on Maple Street, Margot's house. My house now, a place they thought they could take. But I was done letting them take anything from me. Margot's house had always felt like a refuge. But the day I returned, it became something more: a battleground. The windows still framed the same ivy-covered porch. The air still smelled faintly of dried roses and lemonwood polish. But this time, I wasn't coming to rest. I was coming to reclaim. Mr. Grayson had secured temporary access while probate settled. The first thing I did was change the locks. The second, I hired a security firm to install cameras inside, outside, every entrance. You'll be able to monitor it remotely, the technician said. I nodded, not for safety, but for truth. The plan wasn't revenge, it was clarity. I needed them to see themselves in a mirror they couldn't break. I wrote the letter 3 times. The first was too angry, the second too clinical, the third was exactly what I needed it to be. A quiet declaration. I included Margot's letter, the adoption papers, and the hospital report from the night of the accident. At the bottom I wrote, "This home is no longer yours to manipulate. And neither am I." Then I placed it in an envelope with their names and left it on the dining room table under the light Margot used to read by. They came 3 days later. I watched from Jordan's apartment, the security feed streaming silently on my laptop. 7:03 p.m. Ruth's car pulled up. Clarence stepped out first, checking his watch. Ruth followed, stiff and impatient. Emily came too, hanging back on the porch, arms crossed like she wasn't sure if she belonged. They tried the front door, locked, called a locksmith, signed the release, walked in like they still owned the air in the house. Clarence went upstairs. Ruth beelined for the china cabinet. But Emily, she froze. Her eyes landed on the envelope, and something changed. She picked it up. Ruth snatched it from her. As they read, their bodies shifted. Clarence came down holding one of Margot's vases and stopped mid-step. Ruth's face turned gray. Emily's eyes scanned the pages. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her expression didn't just fall, it collapsed. I watched it all unfold with no sound. Just motion. Just truth landing like dust after an earthquake. And that was the moment I understood justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And in that silence, things finally break open, not violently, just undeniably. There's something powerful about not needing to explain yourself anymore. I didn't send threats. I didn't scream. I simply showed them what they had done and let their own reflections speak for me. That night, as the security feed flickered off my phone, buzzed. One message. Can we talk? Just us. It was from Emily. I didn't know Sam. I swear I didn't know. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Cambridge Street Cafe. What I didn't expect was what she would say next. Cambridge Street Cafe was already half full when I arrived. The windows fogged slightly from the morning chill, and the smell of toasted bagels and cinnamon lattes wrapped around me like a blanket. I spotted Emily in the corner booth, just like she said. 2 coffees sat between us, hers, half empty, mine untouched. She stood when she saw me, then sat again awkwardly. You still take it black with 1 sugar, she asked, nudging the cup toward me. I nodded. I do. It was the first time in 3 years we'd been alone together, and for a moment, neither of us knew what to say. I don't know where to start, she admitted, stirring her coffee like the answer might float to the surface. I saw the letter, and the footage. I didn't know Sam. Her voice cracked slightly. I really didn't. I let her speak. She didn't deflect. She didn't deny. I think part of me always knew something was off, she said. You were so quiet, so alone. But I told myself you were just more independent. That maybe Mom and Dad were harder on you because you could take it. And I didn't want to lose the version of them I needed. She looked down her fingers, tracing a ring I'd never seen her wear before. You were always the good one, and I was the golden one. And deep down, I think we both hated those roles. I wanted to argue, but she was right. We had both been placed in corners of the same performance. One in shadow, one in spotlight, but neither by choice. I'm sorry, she said finally, for not asking more questions, for staying quiet when I should have spoken, for every time I made you feel small, just to stay big in their eyes. I didn't have an answer prepared, but I offered the only truth I had. Small steps, I said softly. That's all I can offer right now. Emily nodded. I'll take them, she said. And for once she didn't try to fill the silence. We sat there not as sisters by blood or even by bond, but as 2 women slowly realizing how much damage silence can do, and how healing it feels when it's finally broken. She didn't ask to be forgiven, and I didn't pretend we could fix it all in 1 cup of coffee. But we started something, and that was enough. 2 weeks later, she moved into Margot's East Wing. She said it was temporary. I didn't ask for a timeline. Some days we talked over tea. Other days we passed each other like waves, brief but calm. We didn't call it reconciliation, but it felt like peace. And while Emily was learning how to live without performing, our parents were making one final move. A lawsuit for emotional distress. They claimed my letter had ruined their standing in the community. I stared at the papers and smiled because this time I knew exactly how to answer. The court date was set for a Tuesday in late spring. The air smelled like tulips and new beginnings, which felt oddly appropriate. Their claim, emotional distress. They argued that my letter and the footage had damaged their reputation beyond repair, that the community saw them differently now, that they were being unfairly judged for a private family misunderstanding. I almost laughed when I read that phrase, but I didn't. Because part of healing I've learned is choosing which battles deserve your voice and which ones only deserve your silence. This one, it only needed facts, and the facts were already documented. In court, I didn't speak much. I didn't need to. My attorney presented the letter, the adoption records, the hospital report, the conservatorship filing. Each one told a story louder than any testimony. When it was over, the judge looked at Clarence and Ruth and said simply, "This isn't a case of defamation. It's a case of documented truth. And truth by its very nature cannot be slander." He dismissed the case with prejudice. No appeal. No second try. Just the quiet sound of a gavel sealing a door they thought they could pry back open. It was over. The news spread faster than I expected. We live in a small community, the kind where everyone knows which car belongs to which driveway. Suddenly, their names were missing from charity lists. Their faces disappeared from Sunday brunches and gala photos. People who once praised Ruth's garden parties now crossed the street to avoid small talk. Clarence stepped down from his board position at the country club. No one forced them out, but people noticed. And sometimes being noticed is all it takes. Justice didn't roar, it whispered, and the echo was enough. But I didn't celebrate, not out loud, because what I felt most was not triumph, but relief. I wasn't trying to ruin them. I just wanted to stop bleeding for people who never brought bandages. There's a difference between justice and revenge. One sets you free. The other keeps you tethered. And I was done being tethered to their version of who I was. The version that needed permission to exist. The verdict wasn't about punishment. It was about permission to move on, to breathe deeper, to reclaim my name not as an extension of theirs, but as mine alone. That night, Emily brought takeout from the Thai place Margot used to love. She set the bag on the counter, glanced at the sealed court documents, and said softly, "Congratulations." I looked at her a little confused. For what, she smiled, not wide, but sure, for finally being done with them. I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the kitchen, the one Margot cooked and the one I now called my own, and realized she was right. The noise was gone. All that remained was quiet. And in that quiet, I was ready to build something better. A year later, the dining room glowed with the kind of warmth you can't buy or fake. The light bounced off Margot's old china cabinet, now polished and filled with mismatched mugs and chipped teacups I refused to throw away. Around the table sat the people who had stayed: Jordan with her easy laughter, Celeste passing a basket of warm bread, and Emily quiet, but present, no longer wearing the weight of someone else's script. Mr. Grayson leaned near the fireplace, wine in hand, smiling like he belonged. Because he did. They all did. This wasn't a performance. This was family chosen, real, earned. The house itself had changed too. We fixed the roof, repainted the shutters, added insulation to the upstairs bedrooms. But we kept the creaky floors, the lavender wallpaper in Margot's reading room, the corner in the kitchen where she'd hum Billie Holiday and stir her tea. Some things deserved to stay. They were the parts that held memory, not pain. And as I walked through the halls barefoot and whole, I realized I hadn't just inherited a house. I'd inherited a second chance. Not just to live, but to live as myself without begging for space I already deserved. Upstairs, my office looked different now. Gone were the prototypes and pressure. In their place were sketches, notes, and test results for our new project, Echo Bridge. A communication tool for patients like me, those who were still inside but couldn't speak. We were testing eye tracking patterns, neural response signals, anything that could say, "I'm still here," because I had been there trapped in a body no one fought for until someone did. And if this tool could help even one other person be seen, then everything, the trauma, the silence, even the lawsuit, would have been worth it. I wish I could say the story ended neatly, that all wounds were healed. But real life doesn't work that way. Some scars remain. Some silences never fill. But I'm okay with that now. Because for the first time, I am not waiting to be chosen. I have chosen myself. And I've built a home not out of spite or victory, but out of presence. Love is not loud in this house. It's not flashy. It's steady. And every corner, every breath, every bite of bread around this table is proof that love doesn't always start where we expect, but it can still arrive exactly when we need it most. If you've ever felt invisible, like your worth had to be earned to be real, I want you to know this: you are not alone. And your story doesn't end where someone else walks away. It begins where you decide to stay. If this story moved you, I'd be honored if you subscribed, left a comment, or shared it with someone who needs it. Because sometimes healing starts with a story. And this one was for you.